Welcome to the Complete Beginner's Guide to Indigenous Microorganisms, otherwise known as IMO. IMO is a garden and livestock amendment used in Korean natural farming. The simplest way to put it, IMO brings the abundance of nature to your garden. At the risk of overstating the benefits to this incredible substance, IMO is one of the most effective ways of bringing biodiversity to your soil, creating strong nutrient delivery systems to your plant roots, thereby minimizing the time and money required to keep plants alive and thrive, which obviously isn't a word, but you know what I mean. Now we have individual videos detailing each of the steps, from gathering IMOs in nature all the way to implementation in your garden. This video combines all of the steps into one continuous process, from IMO collection to preservation, diversification to integration, and finally application. So many Asians. Additionally, in this video we include a bonus, the process of making liquid IMO, sometimes referred to as, wait for it, LIMO. Legitimately, it's called LIMO. Everything is time-stamped in this video, so if you want, you can hop around the video to learn about each part of the process, or if you've got some time to kill, just kick back and watch the whole thing start to finish. Either way, if you're interested in getting to know more about indigenous microorganisms and how to use them in your garden, we have a free ebook that contains summaries, recipes, cheat sheets for how to do each part of the process stages 1 through 5. So click the link in the description for that. And with that, let's get into IMO stage 1. So for my collection box, I'm using this worm bin tote, and it's got, as you can see, this perforated edge. It's like a 1/4 inch, and it's just a plastic bin. I mean, typically they say that you want to use wooden bins, but this is what I've got, and this is, you know, I don't have to make anything new. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down this burlap on the inside of the bin, and this is just going to help keep the rice that I put in there so that it doesn't fall through, and it'll also keep some of the bugs out. Okay, I want to make sure there's nothing else in there. And then I'm just going to take my cooked brown rice. This is 5 cups of dry brown rice, and I'm going to fill up this tub about 2/3 of the way. That's what they recommend, or maybe halfway. We'll see how much I've got. I cooked this a while back and I put it on the tray to cool down faster. So this is fully cooled. I'm not going to compact it into the bin, the collection bin. I'm just going to kind of sprinkle it in, and I'll make sure that it's evenly spread out. But I don't want to compact it because I want there to be a little bit of aeration, just an ability for the microbes to get all the way in there. So like I say, I'm just going to use all of this. And you know, we'll see. I mean, it is really hard to get a good collection in my area. It's so dry, but this is what how we're gonna try it. So now that that's in there, it looks like it honestly is filled about 1/3 of the way. So that's totally fine. And then what I'm gonna do, and I'll show you how I do this here, I'm gonna use this cloth to cover it. And I don't want the cloth to sag down and touch it. So I'm gonna tie it on by using this, and I'll get it tight when I actually fill it up, but I'm gonna wait till I fill it up. I'm gonna put some of the mycelium that I find in there, but basically I'm gonna tie it up. And then once I do that, I'll put this little protection lid over the top. This actually fits perfectly. It's not with it or anything, but that's just gonna be one extra layer of protection, and I can kind of put like a leaf mat and maybe some logs over it to kind of disguise it, and then I'll leave it. Let's go to the forest. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my box, my collection box of cooked rice, and I'm gonna clear out a little bit more space. I'm gonna get deep beneath the leaf litter, and I'm just gonna nestle my box in there. I'll cover it up with this. I'm gonna tie it, but before I do that, I'm gonna take like a few tiny strands of the mycelium, and I'm gonna actually just put it in the rice to get the inoculation starting. I'm gonna very gently pick up this strand. I'd love to get a big piece of it. I'm gonna try and get all the leaf debris off of it, if possible. I think I saw this from Chris Trump, but you can see that that's a mycelium thread, and it's holding the leaf mold kind of all together on there. So I don't think it's a huge deal, honestly, if there's a little bit of leaf mold on there. I'm gonna see if I can get all of that or as much of it off as possible. But if I can't, that's fine. Toss it around a little bit. Let's see. So I'm just gonna put this strand right in the box, and I might try and grab one more if I can find one that's big enough. Now, what I was looking for, as I was looking, pieces of wood, like log, or this is just a piece of bark, and that's where mycelium is oftentimes gonna grow. If it's damp and there's wood material, that's a great sign. So I'm just gonna take off some of this and do it carefully. I'll put that in there. Let's try and get one more big piece. So this is a great collection spot for me. It's been very hard for me to find this kind of material. My climate is very dry, but we're in late May, and so it's rained, you know, fairly recently. It's really not going to rain for a while, to my knowledge. Now I'm just going to set this aside. Pretty nice big area. So I've got mycelium underneath where the box is going to go, and I'm just going to tie this on right now. That's on. I'm going to put this box in here. There we go. I'm going to take a couple more pieces. Maybe this log has some mycelium, this little piece of bark, I guess, some mycelium, and I'm just going to put that on top. I don't want to weigh it down too much. I'm just trying to keep the airflow in there. And then I'm going to take my cap, again, very non-official. I just happen to have this tray that fits right over the top. I think I'll put my bag actually over the top of that so that I can lay the debris back on top. So this looks fairly good. I mean, fairly disguised. I'm really hopeful that no one's gonna find it and disturb it at all, or an animal, hopefully not. But I'm gonna check back in on this, and I think probably a week, because the temperatures right now are between probably like 70 at the highest down to 45. And so the culturing will take a little bit longer than in like Hawaii, where it could take like a couple days or something. All right, it's been 10 days since I put the collection box here. I came and checked it several days ago. I think it was around day 5 or 6. There was a tiny bit of fungal development. I saw a little bit of white fuzz and some colorful spots. The weather has it's been pretty cool. Gave it more time, and I'm hoping that I'm gonna open this up and see something really cool. We'll see how it looks. Now, there was definitely something that chewed through the fabric. The first time that I came and checked it, this was had been chewed on. And there were a few bugs, but nothing terrible inside of the collection box. So, coming up for the grand unveiling. Very curious what we're gonna see. And I should say, I also, when I first came back to this had been chewed through. So, there's that. Let's see what we're looking at here. Okay. Nice. That looks like a great collection. There's definitely some green and kind of gray molds, but for the most part, that looks the white fungus that you're looking for as a IMO collection. Feel very good about that. There's a few bugs in there. That worm, some worms over here, and crawlies. I think that they probably helped bring this mold into the collection box. So that's awesome. All right, we're gonna take this, we'll wrap it back up and we'll take it home. All right guys, I'm back home from collecting my IMO, and I've just got some brown sugar, I've got some jars, I've got a bowl and a scale. And basically what I'm gonna do with all of this stuff, I'm gonna combine the brown sugar and the IMO 1. That's gonna serve to kind of preserve the IMO 1, and after 7 days of interacting with the sugar and feeding off of that, it's gonna go into a hibernation mode, and then it'll be officially IMO 2, which means that you can then, we'll show you how to turn IMO 2 into IMO 3. This is a really essential step though. Take this home, and within the same day you want to feed it the brown sugar. because otherwise the microbes will continue to develop, and I guess they just maybe die off, or they kind of will produce bad things or whatever. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe they just starve. So first I'm going to take the IMO and I'm going to weigh it in this bowl. This is a large mixing bowl. So I'm going to use my scale. I'll tare it and I'm going to set it to grams just because it's a tad more precise. And I'm just going to take the collection and start breaking it into pieces. I took most of the bugs that were in here already out, but there's probably some more critters in there. And this is just sort of peeling off the burlap. This just holds together. It's an interesting texture. It smells like really strong garlic. I think that that's a good thing. But it's got all the white fuzz and stuff that I'm looking for. Got good mycelium development. Yep. Just kind of peeling it off. Again, this is the first time that I've really got a collection like this. But my understanding is that you want to just be relatively gentle with it. Don't want to stress out the microbes too much. That being said, we are going to mix it all up. And I mean, I'm just going to flick off little bits of debris that got in there, and obviously want to take out the bugs. 750 grams, or almost a couple pounds. You can really see the fuzz has gone all the way through the rice. Looks really fun. It's got a fun texture. Okay, and I think I only have about 4 pounds of rice, so I'm going to stop there, right at about 2,000 grams or 2 kilograms. And we'll set this aside. Okay, so we've got almost exactly 2,000 grams, 2 kilograms of IMO1. And now I'm going to take my brown sugar, and I want to add equal parts brown sugar to the rice and IMO. And I think this is going to be about 2,000 grams, but we'll just add in a little bit at a time. Okay, just enough. We're at 1.97 kilograms, so that's perfect. All right, we've got the 2 ingredients, and now I'm just going to start mixing it up. All right, well, I've mostly mixed it up, mixed all the brown sugar in, and what this is going to start doing is the moisture. I actually don't know if it's the moisture from the brown sugar, the molasses in there, or the rice. Regardless, there's going to be moisture created that starts coming out, and this is basically going to start almost liquefying, and I can see it's very moist already right now. I'm going to go ahead and start putting this into one of my jars. We'll see what it looks like. Take this one. This is about a gallon. I'm going to fill this up. It's filled 2/3, maybe a little bit more of the way. And the reason that you want to fill it up only 2/3 is because this stuff can bubble and kind of bubble over. So you just want to make sure that it's not, filled to the brim. The amount that I have here is probably going to be like absolutely plenty for my needs in my small garden. So I'm going to stop there. I'll see what I've got. This is a 1/2 gallon jar. Okay, so these are 2/3-ish of the way full. This is probably playing it safe. This is almost just a little over halfway full. But we're going to check back in with these in a little bit, and we're going to see how they're doing. Basically, what I'm going to look for is if they're bubbling after the liquid has really been drawn out, the moisture's been drawn out. If they're bubbling, then it means that the microbes are overly active still, and we need to add more brown sugar. If they're not, then we got just the right amount, and we can put them in the closet for the next week, and then we'll check in on them then. All right, so it's been a couple hours, and you can see that the brown rice is submerged in its own liquid. The brown sugar has disappeared, and There are some bubbles at the top, but it's not bubbling actively. So I think that those are okay. And basically what that means is that I think we're good to go to put this into kind of a colder space. I'm going to put it in our root cellar, but you could put it in a closet. I think you don't want these coming into contact with light, so just a dark, cool environment. And we're going to check in on them in 1 week. I've got a rubber band that's holding on some paper towels to keep the flies out, but these need to be open air. This is my very, very official cap. All right guys, our IMO 2 is ready. We let it sit for I think 10, 11 days and it is fully ready to use so far as I know. Now I'm going to show you how to make IMO 3. This is my first time ever making it. I'm going to show you just from what I've learned, what I've observed from a lot of different people. I'm going to give you the basic version of this as well as just the additions that you can add. As far as I'm aware, you don't have to add much past these 4 initial ingredients. So those 4 ingredients are, number 1, you obviously need your IMO 2, your Indigenous Microorganisms 2, which is just IMO 1 preserved in brown sugar. Second thing you need is some sort of carbohydrate source. I'm using wheat bran. I just picked this up from my local feed store. The third ingredient you need is a high carbon source. I've got a couple that I'm going to be using. I've got wood chips right here. These are really nicely decomposed wood chips. I've got some dried leaves. I'm throwing in some biochar, some activated charcoal. Why not? Kill a couple birds with one stone. Beyond that, we can just add water to hydrate the pile and get it to the right consistency. IMO 3, one way of looking at it is that you're making a miniature hot compost pile. So it doesn't really get very high. It's just going to be a couple feet wide and maybe not even a foot high, maybe a foot high. It's still going to heat up dramatically because of the indigenous microorganisms. Those 4 ingredients will get you there. What I'm also going to be adding, and this is just because I have these on hand. So if you don't have these on hand, don't go out and buy them. I didn't go out to buy anything extra. I just, again, have these things on hand. I'm going to be using some raw apple cider vinegar. Thank you, Costco, for that. Molasses, plant fertilizer that I made from weeds last year, humic acid that I just collected from my worm bin. This is just worm leachate. Worm leachate is very high in humic acid. Sea salt, and then I've got my water that I've been letting sit out to dechlorinate for 24 hours. Those are going to be my ingredients for this pile. I'm going to mix up all of my ingredients, except for the carbohydrate and the carbon source, into my bucket of water. So I'll take my bucket, and this is a 5-gallon bucket. First one I'll add is my sea salt. Typically, the original way of making this is by using sea water. I'm nowhere near the sea right now, so I'm going to be using sea salt. You use 20 ounces of seawater, which translates to roughly 20 grams or a tablespoon of sea salt. So I'm just going to add that in. I'm going to add in my humic acid next, my worm leachate. This I'm adding in approximately 5 tablespoons. This might be a little bit more, but my worm leachate is probably not super dense, so I'm just going to add that right in. I'm going to add in about an 1/8 cup of molasses. I'm just kind of eyeballing this, a couple tablespoons. I'm going to add in a splash of my liquid fertilizer, my natural liquid fertilizer. This stuff smells so rank. Very little bit. Okay, for my vinegar, I'm going to add the same amount as my molasses. I'm just going to add about an 1/8 cup. Again, obviously approximating, just doing this by feel. And then finally, the last bit will be my IMO 2. So I'm going to take this, and I just need to add about 6 ounces. 3/4 cup. This is just brown rice. Add a few of those. And the IMO 2, I'll just say now, it still smells pretty garlicky. From what I've heard is what it's supposed to smell like. Don't know why. So I'm just going to mix this up nice and thoroughly. This is kind of like baking. I mean, you just want to combine your wet ingredients first so that they all go in evenly. Okay, I'm going to build my pile right around here. This is going to act as the food source. These microbes. This is a 35-pound bag. This is probably going to make more IMO 3 than I need for our tiny little garden. So I'm going to go just kind of spread this out so that I can spread my wood chips and incorporate some dried leaves on top. From what I've heard, you want equal parts carbon and carbohydrate. There's some wood chips. We'll add in some dried leaves.
They're going to be another carbon source. We'll stop there. Sprinkle in my biochar, and now I'm just going to mix this up. So I feel pretty good about that pile. I think that's relatively mixed. All right, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a well in the center. This is kind of like if you've ever seen people make pasta, or if you've made pasta yourself, you kind of get your flour on the counter and then you make a well in the middle, put your eggs in there. So I'm going to add my inoculant, and I'm just going to add a little bit and try and incorporate that. And I'm just going to do this by hand so that I kind of get a feel for it. I want all this to get soaked up before I add any more. We don't want to add too much water in because I'm out of wheat bran, but I guess you could just add in more carbon material. Try and get the outer edges of the pile in there. Just trying to get this so that every little bit is a little moist. Okay, make my well again. It's definitely getting damper. Okay, so I think I'm getting pretty close. I need to add a little bit more in, and we'll incorporate the sides. It kind of feels like what you'd want your hot compost to feel like. Just starting to clump in the hand, hold together a little bit, not just wisping away. But you don't want it sopping wet or dripping, or else it'll go anaerobic. That just means some unhelpful bacteria could form. Yeah, I think I'll add just the rest of that. That might actually just do it.
All right, guys, the first pile that I made did not turn out exactly how I thought it was supposed to. It's apparently not supposed to raise above 120 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're just gonna give it another try. We've got more IMO 2. We've got more materials. I got another bag of wheat bran. Okay, I think we might actually be there with that amount of moisture. So we'll get our burlap and go ahead and cover it. And we're gonna monitor the temperature, and we'll just check this 12 hours from now. It's like 8 p.m. So we'll check it around 8 in the morning, see how the activity is, and we'll just see. We just wanna make sure that it doesn't go above 120. So I checked this pile about 13 hours, maybe 14 hours after making it yesterday, and it had already heated up to like 117 or something like that. I broke it up and kind of tried to get some of the heat out. I had to actually go to work. I broke it up, put it back together, came back 2.5 hours later to check on it, and it had skyrocketed up to about 135. This thing just heats up so fast. So I quickly disassembled it. I just, spread it out a bit and tried to get it to cool down, which it did. But then I brought it back together after a little bit, and it started heating up right away really quickly. Spread it out again. Then I left it for a while, and now I just about an hour ago put it back together, actually maybe like 30 minutes ago, and it's up to 100. I'm having trouble keeping this pile cool enough. So, this is just what this is all about though. It's trial and error and figuring it out. I'm just learning that with the materials that I'm using and the IMO 2 that I'm using to inoculate it, it's heating up so quickly. I really need to probably be around for a lot of the time. Okay guys, we're making our third pile of IMO. This time I'm using slightly different ingredients. I'm just using some all-purpose flour and some oats. And these are totally legitimate ingredients that you can use. Flour, typically you don't want to use because it's just a little bit more expensive than wheat bran, but I'm going to try and make actually a small pile. A couple other things I'm going to try are trying to add in more carbon material to keep the pile from heating up too much, because my last couple piles have heated up like right away. And this is also going to be a really hot day. We're starting this in the morning. It's going to get up to 100 ambient temperatures. So I think this pile is going to heat up quickly, but we'll just keep an eye on it. Again, starting in the morning, I'm going to check it multiple times throughout the day to make sure it's not overheating, and then I'll see where it's at night, and we'll go from there. All right guys, it's been one day. It's actually been a little bit more than a day, and I'm really glad I checked it. The pile is at 120. Now I checked it an hour and a half ago, and it was at 115 or 116. So it's climbing right now. It's in the safe zone, but as just a general protocol, you're highly recommended to turn your pile, which just means flipping it up. So I'm gonna do that right now, and I'm gonna take off the burlap and see what it looks like. It looks about the same. I'm gonna take out my temperature probe and just give it a good mix up. All right, everyone, fourth time is the charm. We are trying again. The last pile, don't even care about that one. It heated up past 120. This is the story of my life now. So you know, we're just gonna try again. This time I'm using just oats. These are whole oats that I got from the feed store. I've already got my nutrients mixed. I'm gonna swirl them up in my 5-gallon bucket and get going. This time what I'm gonna try is, I'm gonna try getting the pile a little bit more saturated. It was really drying out before, and I'm gonna be adding in a lot more carbon. That's just my best guess. I'm gonna be trying to add in a lot of carbon. So I'm gonna lay out my oats. This is a 50-pound bag. I'm gonna lay out half of it. So around 25 pounds. I'm gonna mix up my nutrients. Filled up this bucket with water to let it dechlorinate for a couple days, and my kids decided to toss a bunch of grass and leaves in there, which it's all right. So what I've been doing before is just kind of carbon by volume, like equal parts by volume, and I think that what I need to do is just try and get it closer to by weight. So leaves weigh hardly anything. I'm gonna add in some wood chips and some biochar, or activated charcoal rather, not quite biochar yet. Yeah, I'm feeling some more leaves. There's some sticks in here which should keep the pile lofty. I really want to give this a thorough mixing so that nothing wonky happens. There's my well. And get some more of these grass clippings out. Water is 80 degrees already. I'm gonna add in just a little bit more wood chip. I'm probably overthinking it, but just to add the rest of that. Let's try and go in with a little bit more water. Probably put in 2 gallons. Let's go for maybe, yeah, just a touch more. I think that's gonna be good. Took a little while to mix. All right, well, I'm gonna cover this and we will be back tomorrow morning. All right, well, here we are 1 week in. This pile, I've been actually flipping it every single day and watering it quite a bit. So I'm surprised at how much moisture this thing can soak up. I think this is unique to our environment probably, but if you live in a dry climate, you might find that really relevant. I watered it really heavily last night, and I'll be interested to see what it looks like when I actually get into it, but there is definitely more of the white fuzz covering the outside. It's right about at 120, haven't flipped it at all today. It's a touch under, maybe 117 or 118. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull out the probe and give this pile a toss up. Well, so there definitely is more clumping. Guys, our IMO 3 has finished. It's finished fermenting, it's cooled down. You can see that there is a good amount of white fungal activity all over the materials. There's also some blue bits and some gray bits, and there's not tons of it, which is totally okay. If your whole pile has covered blue fungus, that might be a bad sign. But because we've just got kind of flecks of blue and gray in with the white, we're totally good. You should maybe see some mycelium strands throughout there as well. That's basically what you're looking for. And now it's ready to be stored. And there's a couple ways you can store this. You can put it into breathable sacks or like a cedar box if you have a big one. But you basically just want to keep this in a cool, kind of dark environment. This is shelf stable in those conditions for a long time, probably up to a year. You can either put it into storage immediately, or you can immediately then use it to make IMO 4, which is what I'm going to do. All right, guys, we are ready to make this pile of IMO 4. We've got our IMO 3, and this just finished cooling down, so we're gonna use it right away. And I'm gonna use the whole pile because we wanna spread this over our whole property. All you need for IMO 4, this is a very similar process to making IMO 3. You just need your finished IMO 3 and then equal parts soil from your area. On top of that, I'm going to be using some activated charcoal that will get charged up. I'm going to be incorporating the same nutrients as I did before. I've already mixed them up. I've got the sea salt, molasses, vinegar, natural fertilizer. I still don't have any OHN, so I'm not going to add it. Before I add this to my water, I'm going to add some humic acid. I'm going to show you a different way that you can actually yield humic acid. If you saw our IMO 3 video, I just collected worm castings leachate. That was directly from the worm bin. Now that totally works, but my worm bin had kind of gone anaerobic, is anaerobic right now. So I'm actually in the process of repairing it a bit, getting the castings kind of back online. I'm not really eager to use those castings because I don't want any of the funky anaerobic bacteria to mess with the more aerobic process that IMO cultivation is. So I have some finished castings from a separate thing, and these I know have really good microbial activity. I've just put a handful into a paint strainer and I've tied it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to steep this a couple times in my bucket of water. It's just a gentle steep. I'm just going to do this for a little while until I kind of see the humic acid coming out. You can also do this with compost. If you want to put a little bit more compost in a bag. Both of these, compost and vermicastings, contain humic and fulvic acid. We're going to make sure we do that so that we have a good food for our fungus or fungi rather. Okay, now that I've got that, I'm going to add in my other nutrients into my approximately 4 gallons of water. Now that is ready to go. This is the exact same nutrient water that we're using from IMO 3 minus the IMO 2 because we've got our IMO 3. I'm going to spread out this pile a little bit so that I can kind of get a better sense of the mass, and then I'm going to just pour my native soil on top of it. Actually, I'll add a little bit of charcoal. Now obviously you can weigh your materials, but with this large of an amount, it's not super feasible for me to weigh it out. I don't have a giant industrial scale. And now we're going to mix it. Okay, I think that's fairly well mixed. I'm going to make my well in the center, just like with IMO 3. You can see I can just clump it up into a ball pretty easily. It's just completely damp, but it's really not, it's not dripping at all. And this is the consistency that you want. Maybe a little bit more damp. I'd actually add in a tiny bit more, but I think this is pretty much what you're looking for. Just holds together in your hands, but it crumbles when you toss it. Main thing is you don't want this to be oversaturated because it can go anaerobic, just like IMO 3. So I think we're gonna go ahead and leave it right there. And like IMO 3, we're gonna make a pile with a height of no more than 18 inches, but just somewhere between a foot and 18 inches. And this is going to do a similar thing. It's going to heat up. We want to make sure that it doesn't surpass 120 Fahrenheit because that'll start killing off all the diversity. I'm going to make this just a nice kind of middle ground, maybe around 14 or 16 inches in height, just eyeballing it. And of course I'll cover it up. I'm here about 12 hours later, maybe 10 hours later, and the pile was at 120, which is okay. That's kind of what is going to happen. Spread it out, as you can see. I just wanted to kind of spread it out quickly so that it didn't peak over 120. This is just going to let it cool down a bit. What I noticed when I was spreading it out is that the material is quite dry. All I'm going to do is I've gathered up some more of my water, which has all the nutrients in there, so the humic acid and sea salt and vinegar, all that. Just made another batch of that, and I'm just going to incorporate it in with the IMO 4 to kind of rehydrate it a bit. We're in a very, very dry climate, and it's very hot. It was up to 100 today, so it kind of makes sense that it would start to dry out, but I also may have not added enough water in the first place. Either way, that's okay because it is still heating up. It's very active, clearly. And the main thing is I just want the moisture content to kind of stay in the right zone for the first 5 days especially. It's supposed to dry out. This early on, probably just need more moisture, and it might have just taken some time to kind of soak it all in. So I'm gonna just add in my moisture. I'm gonna try and spread it out evenly. This is the last time that I'll show you flipping the pile because it's pretty much the same thing every time. So the next time I show you what it looks like, it'll be finished, but you basically wanna just monitor pile. Try your best to not get it to spike over 120. If it does for a little bit, like 30 minutes or something, that's all right. If it goes for more than 30 minutes, this is for IMO 4 or IMO 3, you'll still want to use it. Don't necessarily throw it out. You can finish the process, but it's not going to have the microbial diversity as it would if you kind of get it in that sweet spot between 110 and 120. And you might want to play around with the height of the pile. It could be that you're piling it too high, and that makes heat generate more quickly. Could be that you want to spread it out a little bit more and have it just a shallower height. This stuff is pretty damp, but I think it's probably in a much better place. Still, I'm not getting tons of moisture through my fingers, maybe just barely starting to squeeze through. So that was definitely more water. And I mean, guys, also just a side note, whenever you're making this stuff, you should definitely touch it with your hands, get it on your skin, because these microbes are so incredibly healthy. We'll be back. All right, guys, this is the pile at almost exactly 36 hours later. I checked this last night when it was at the 24-hour mark, and it was kind of around 113. So I took a risk, probably shouldn't have, but took a risk and let it go overnight, checked it in the morning, and now we definitely need to flip it. So we don't want it to heat up any more than this. I don't think it's spiking right now, but like actively rising. It's probably just very gradually going up, but we're gonna give it a flip. So we'll cover this back up, and I'm gonna just keep an eye on this all day today, because now that it's kind of in the temperature range, it depends on how hot it really is, but now that it's in that sort of range, it can more easily creep up on you and spike over 120. So it's been a week, and this pile has heated up. It's cooled down and stayed cool. We're down to about 95, which is pretty close to ambient temperatures right now. It's quite warm. So this is finished. I'm going to say this is finished IMO 4. And part of the reason that I'm pretty sure that the fungal development has happened is because we've got plenty of the white kind of mycelium-like stuff going on. It kind of looks like spider webs or cobwebs even. And there's these clumps that when you open them, you can see all this fungal development in there. It's not like glowing, but for my first attempt, I feel pretty good about it. I feel great. So now this is, at this point, ready to be used as IMO 5, which will be in our next video. There are 5 main ways that you can apply your IMO that I'm going to cover. The first one is by using it to top dress your soil. Top dressing is probably the most straightforward way to apply IMO 4. The experts say to apply it at 120 pounds per acre, but on my scale, I just toss it over the soil, kind of lightly dusting the ground. You can spread this on cover crops right before termination, which is what I'm doing here. You'll probably want to make sure wherever you apply your soil that you water it in immediately afterward, preferably with dechlorinated water. We just use a water filter attachment for our hose. And you also need to make sure that the IMOs are covered by some sort of mulch. So this can be a cover crop, it can be a carbon material like wood chips or straw or dried brown leaves. Whatever you want to use is great, but make sure to mulch so that you don't risk the IMO evaporating or getting scorched by the sun. Just remember the environment that the original IMO 1 that you collected was in. Lots of leaf litter protecting it from the elements. The second way you can apply IMO is around the base of your trees. This is apparently a really good way to bring health to an orchard or even a single tree. As was the case for top dressing on garden beds, you will still want to mulch and water the IMO4 that you spread around the base of the trees. Another way you can do IMO5 is by applying your IMO4 to your chicken coop. And this is one of the OG ways IMO4 was used. It was actually one of the main reasons that it was invented by Master Cho, was to reduce chicken coop and pig pen odors. IMO has a crazy good ability to regulate moisture levels and keep microbial balance. So throw some in with your chickens or pigs if you have them. In addition to IMO, you'll also want to make sure you have plenty of carbon material in the coop and run to soak up their nitrogen-rich poop. The fourth way to make IMO5 is to incorporate IMO4 into a pile of cold compost or finished compost. The key here is that you don't want the IMO to overheat. So if you're making a brand new pile using the Johnson-Su method, where you get the pile up to 130, 40, even 160 degrees, you don't want to be adding your IMO4 to it because you'll kill off the diversity. 120 is the max temperature that these diverse strains of bacteria can endure, so don't risk by putting it into a hot pile or a brand new pile that's going to heat up quickly. Instead, add it to a pile like this that is already cooled down and let the IMO4 act as an inoculant for the compost. Just let it incorporate for a couple weeks and then you can use it in your garden bed. Finally, the fifth way that you can make IMO5 is by mixing your IMO4 in with a nitrogen-rich material such as a crop residue or manure. One more time I'll say that you want to monitor this pile closely so that it doesn't go over 120 degrees. This will make you essentially a very ultra-rich inoculating compost that can be used on your soil as a very light top dress. And that is how you make IMO5. There are many ways of using your IMO, but this should give you a starting place. All right guys, now that we've made IMO4, I want to show you how you can make liquid IMO. The reason that you'd want something like this is basically so that you can cover a lot of space quickly. It's sometimes easier to water something in, or if you have a sprayer, you can spray it through that. It's advised that you follow up your IMO4 application or IMO5 with a liquid IMO. Not essential, but you can if you want to. Or you can just use it on its own. Another cool thing that you can do is that if you have the Jadam wetting agent, you can combine the liquid IMO similar to how you would combine the Jadam microbial solution or any of the other solutions with that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's totally fine. We do have a video on how to make the Jadam wetting agent, so check that out. But otherwise, this is going to be how to make liquid IMO. This is also called soil treatment solution in KNF terms. Here's what you're going to need. You're going to need some dechlorinated water in a 5-gallon bucket. This is about full, maybe 4.5 gallons worth. You're going to need your IMO4. I've got just some in my bucket here. If you don't have IMO4, you can also use IMO2, and it'll just be slightly less diverse, but it will actually achieve a similar function. Here we're using IMO4. You'll need some humic acid. Here I've just got a handful of worm castings, and I'll show you how you can get some humic acid out of that. If you have a handful of compost, you can get humic acid out of that as well. But I've got worm castings here, some high quality sea salt, Redmond's real salt, and this is going to give our brew some trace minerals. I've got some blackstrap molasses, some mineral extract in vinegar, and some LAB. So this is kind of, you know, so a lot of the traditional KNF nutrients, some of the stuff that you use to make IMO4 and 3, but you actually don't need any of that. Technically, you can just do this with IMO4 and water and your equipment. And then speaking of equipment, you're going to need two, at least for this one, you're going to need 2 paint strainers or something that you can wrap up, like a piece of cloth, cheesecloth, an old shirt, something that you can just kind of tie up. I really like the paint strainers. These are just super nice. They're pretty cheap. You will need I already said the 5-gallon bucket. You're going to need a bubbler of some sort, and we'll show you how that kind of gets hooked up once we get into it. But we'll start with actually just drawing out our humic acid. And again, if you have humic acid, then you could totally just use that. I've got, like I said, a handful of worm castings, and I'm just going to show you how I put this in. I've got my worm castings, and this basically now is a tea bag. I'm just going to make a really loose knot. And all I'm going to do is get this wet in the water, get it saturated, that liquid that's coming out, it has more than just humic acid, some fulvic acids as well, but that is going to be a good source of humic acid. I'm not really using too many measurements. This is kind of eyeballing it, especially for the humic acid. Basically, the humic acid is just kind of the extra food. Just like with IMO 3 and 4, it's the extra food for the fungal development. So I'm gonna steep this for a little bit, tap it against the side of the bucket here. You don't wanna do this super vigorously because you don't really want a ton of particles going through. There you go, I'm gonna call that good. Next, I'll toss in the salt. I'm using about 20 grams here for a 5-gallon bucket. And if you have sea water, then that's even better. Use that. I've got my blackstrap molasses. I'm gonna add in probably about a tablespoon. The filter that I use to get my dechlorinated water also filters out chloramine. That's really great because that's in a lot of tap waters, but if you put molasses in your water, that will also help get rid of the chloramine very quickly. This is my mineral extract. I'm just gonna add in a little bit of that. Again, just kind of the standard KNF inputs. LAB. Probably a 1/4 cup. And now I'm ready to get my IMO 4. So I'm gonna load up this bag. So I've probably got 1/2 gallon of IMO 4 there. And I'm gonna saturate this, kind of get this going, get it soaking up the water. I'm gonna make sure there's no dry clumps in there. Now that that's finished, we're gonna hook up the bubbler. One other thing I'm gonna add to this is just a rock to kind of weigh it down. Take one of these, and that way it'll help it just kind of fully submerge as it's bubbling. Now I'm going to start off with just a small amount of the bubbles, and I'm going to use 2 of these. I've got 6 tubes on the bubbler here. I'm just going to start off with these 2, and for this one I'm going to put inside of the bag. And this is a little trick I learned recently. The purpose of this is that if you have this much material in here, the chances of some of it going anaerobic or kind of not getting aerated, obviously you want this aerated, that's why we're using the bubbler. The chances of there being an anaerobic pocket inside of this big sack are pretty high. So I'm putting this right in the middle of the bunch, and then I'm going to take a rubber band and I'm going to attach it actually right here. So I'll put my rubber band here, and I guess I'll have to tie this. You could use a piece of string or something. So now that's in there. I'm going to make sure that the bubbler is kind of all the way through so that it's in the center of this baggie. And then I'm going to put in one other to start just right in here. Here's my bubbler. And then once I plug it in, it'll start bubbling away. Okay, so this is pretty good. It looks pretty good to me. I'm gonna put a cover over it. Just got this burlap here, pretty ratty piece. Okay, and then I'm going to use these boards, hold it in place. So it's not too much pressure to kink any of the tubes. This is gonna bubble away, and we're gonna check in on this. I think, so you can brew these for up to 48 hours and as little as 24 hours. And depending on your climate, how warm it is, it'll go faster. If it's warm, it'll probably take a little bit longer if it's cooler. For us right now, we're hitting highs of probably 90, maybe mid 90s in the day, so it's pretty warm. And so I'm gonna give this 36 hours, just split the difference, and we'll check in on it then, and I'll show you how you can dilute it. We're here a couple days later, and it's pretty blustery, so hopefully the wind isn't too bad, but I'm gonna go ahead and unplug our bubbler. This should be totally finished. I'll take everything out. This is our finished liquid IMO. I'm actually gonna let that just drain the rest of the way. And I'm gonna go ahead and smell this with my hand. So I'm not getting any anaerobic or kind of putrid ammonia-like smells. There is a good amount of sediment on the bottom. Probably not ideal. So the reason that it's not ideal is because it could indicate that it went anaerobic, or at least that part of it is anaerobic. But what I think I'll do is I'll just kind of scoop off the top and use that. So I'm going to show you a couple ways that we can use this. Actually, I should say, in order to get that to avoid that happening, I probably just needed to put my tubes down closer to the bottom of the bucket and maybe just put one more in to kind of keep the water flowing from up there. Not the end of the world. The top does not smell bad at all. So a couple options for applying this, I'll show you. One is that we'll do a application on our plants. I've got a watering can here filled with water, and I'm just gonna put in a little bit more. This is a 2-gallon, or a little bit of IMO, liquid IMO. This is a 2-gallon watering can, and I'm just gonna put in approximately like a cup, maybe a little bit more than a cup. This stuff goes a long way. This I will apply to the soil where there's plants in the ground. So I'm going to put this on our cover crop and on a couple of other plants. Before I do that though, I'll also fill up another watering can, and this is the main use that I'm actually going to try and get out of our IMO, our liquid IMO, and that is as a soil drench. So we just made some new garden beds, and I'm going to apply this undiluted in those areas, and it'll just kind of get the soil rocking with microbes. Now the last way that I'm going to use this is as a foliar application, and this is an optional step, but we've got some of our Jadam wetting agent in this bottle. It's mixed up already with some of our natural pesticide, and you can check out our video on that. But I'm going to put in some of the IMO, the liquid IMO, in this bottle, and the wetting agent helps it to kind of adhere to the plant. It spreads out more on the plant leaves, and this is great for fighting fungal disease like powdery mildew. So we're just going to spray this everywhere. I'm going to put a very little bit, just got a tablespoon that I'm going to pop in here, and we'll be nice and generous with our application because not that much, but a little does go a long way with these sort of things. And friends, that is the complete beginner's guide to indigenous microorganisms. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it with someone who might benefit from learning about this for their garden. Of course, download our free IMO ebook if that would be helpful for you. We made this specifically because we know it can't help to have kind of different resources in different formats. I know I sometimes need something tangible to read and reference. If that's you, click the link in the description box. If you want to see more content like this in the future, subscribe to our channel. We try to come out with some helpful gardening, fermentation, life content regularly, so subscribing is the best way to keep up to date with those releases. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day or night, and get going on your IMO if you have yet to do so. You won't regret it, and your garden certainly won't mind either. Thanks for watching, and happy growing.